capacity of that one nation. The nation almost reflexively has the for metamorphosizing, can I say that? Metamorphosizing into becoming the enemy of the peace that it may have been expected to create and preserve. The defender becomes the aggressor. History will not likely prove much different for Pax Americana than it did for Pax Romana. That again was from Stu Luttich of Geneva. And the other letter in the Journal Star today comes from Logan Christie of Lincoln. Mr. Christie writes, I assume it's Mr., but maybe not. Logan writes, after winning the Republican primary for the Lancaster County Treasurer position, Matt Schulte said, I have been encouraged by the amount of support I've had across the country. People clearly were looking for a change in leadership because of the question of character. And he refers to the article Incumbent Stebbing Knocked Out in May 16th Journal Star. His statement is surely in reference to the indictments pending against his opponent, Andy Stebbing. I remember when Mr. Schulte ran for the Lincoln School Board a few years ago. His qualifications were challenged because his children were homeschooled and not even attending Lincoln Public Schools. Mr. Schulte promised faithfully that if he were elected, he would enroll his children in public school the following year. Once his election was secured, however, he seems to have changed his mind. His children were not enrolled for the next term at Lincoln Public Schools and were not until the next year. We all know that election promises are not worth a sow's ear on a hog farm. In my opinion, however, a promise is a promise and one not to be taken lightly, regardless of the reason it is made. So if Mr. Schulte wants to question anyone's character, perhaps he should start with his own. Rachel Garver has my vote. She has so far kept her promises. Again, that was from Logan Christie of Lincoln.
This is from the Public Pulse, the Omaha World Herald. Using ethanol blend gasoline. A letter in the May 21st Public Pulse, Fuel Choice Can Benefit Wallet and State, provides only one side of the ethanol use debate. If you perform the research, you will see that ethanol does not have the BTU rating of 100% gasoline. It takes about 20% more ethanol to equal the energy of gasoline. As a result, you will receive less fuel economy with the use of E10 ethanol, about 3%. For example, if you receive 17 miles per gallon using 100% gasoline, using the E10 blend will get you about 16.5. E15 blend will get you 16.235. E85 will get you about 12.6. You will have to refuel more frequently with the use of an ethanol blend. Ethanol does burn cooler than 100% gasoline. The octane rating for ethanol is about 100 or better, which means that it burns for a longer period of time and delivers more of its energy to the engine. The reason an engine seems to get hotter during such high octane fuel is that the burn time is longer. Engines using ethanol blends as opposed to gasoline tend to retain more heat than with a lower octane fuel. The life of the battery and the rubber in the engine compartment will be reduced. Shelf life of E10 ethanol blend gasoline is 90 to 100 days under ideal conditions. Ethanol attracts moisture by nature, therefore it should not be used in small engines, lawnmowers, snowblowers, and chainsaws. Older vehicles can also experience problems using ethanol. Collector car owners, take heed, and that's from Jack Urban of Omaha. Restaurant taxes paid off. Among the stories in the World Herald describing this year's Berkshire Hathaway stockholders meeting was one that noted different customs and practices in other parts of the world. In some countries, there is no custom of tipping waiters and servers at restaurants and bars. The expectation there is that waiters and servers are paid a living wage, and the price for a meal is what the menu says it is. When visitors to Omaha restaurants fail to practice the American custom of tipping, it means that the waiters and servers might get nothing on tabs as large as $200. What these customers did pay, however, on the $200 tab was a 2.5% contribution to the Omaha City Treasury. For the past 7 years, visitors have purchased meals and drinks that added significant revenue to the city of Omaha. Omaha's current mayor got elected in 2012 in large part because of criticism of this restaurant tax. She indicated that if elected, she would try to lower or end it. Fortunately, actions speak louder than words. Her administration has not gotten rid of this revenue generator. The revenue continues to exceed projections every year, saving Omaha residents millions in taxes from other areas. The mayor's office recently announced another budget surplus for the city of Omaha. The restaurant tax introduced by Mayor Jim Suttle continues to bring benefits to the city of Omaha, even after his time in office has ended. And that's from Rick Behrens of Omaha. Build fences around schools. Why are we not building attractive fences around our school properties? 2 points of ingress and guards manning each point. I'm sure someone will make a prison comparison, but this is where our lives in America have gone. No one has offered any ideas to stop these senseless killings. All I hear is 2 weeks of condolences and then life as usual, at least for all of us who have not lost a loved one. That's from Bob Eggermeyer of Omaha. Population shift and the president. First, as a lifetime Nebraskan, my thanks to Dr. Quint Jones for choosing Nebraska as his base for serving in the medical profession. However, in reading Dr. Jones' May 17th Public Pulse letter, Nebraska needs culture change, he made too many points that simply require a challenge. Blaming our fairly elected president for any outbound shift of Nebraska's population is most probably based on personal political persuasion and not fact. After all, what state would our young ladies and farmers find safe from our president's policies and peccadillos? Is Nebraska unique that it alone is subject to issues of our nation? That said, shouldn't one be more concerned with results of our leaders' policies and programs than their personal lives? I would also ask if Jones would prefer that our governor be elected only after being certified as a pauper. If so, that would often also suggest that that person would be or have been a recipient of various welfare assistance programs. Regarding his critical reference concerning the decision to pass on Medicaid expansion, I contend more physicians have chosen not to accept federally funded patients than those who have left Nebraska because the state chose not to expand the program. If Medicaid had been expanded, the explosive cost to the Nebraska citizenry would have been devastating. While Jones appears to approach it from a diametrically different political perspective than mine, we seem to agree that Washington may summarily be considered the swamp. Gerald Brown of Boys Town. Plan for the worst. With all the tension in the world between nations, we should be thinking about survival if war comes. Missile shelters, underground food storage, water, garden seeds, plants, animals for reproduction, or anything that a nuclear explosion would destroy, medical supplies and equipment, etc. All households should be doing something for immediate survival. Plan ahead, not to be dead. Robert Fonfara of Omaha. Stranger to the rescue. Several nights ago, my daughter filled her gas tank at a convenience store. When she went to pay, she discovered that she did not have enough money in her debit account to cover her purchase. A female customer behind her quickly stepped forward and told the clerk to put everything on her tab. She paid and left before my daughter could thank her benefactor properly. I would like to thank this individual and ask God to bless her. And all this time, I thought the Lone Ranger was a man.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Well, we'll turn now to the editorials in the two papers. And of course, on Tuesday, I don't know about the other days, but on Tuesday, the Lincoln Journal-Star runs some quotes from people around in Lincoln and other places. And so here they are. The first one says, they're coming out of their dens and they're active and playful, and most people think they're pretty cute, but they're still wildlife and people need to leave them alone. That was a quote from the Animal Control Director, Steve Beal, on the growing numbers of red foxes in Lincoln. And then here's the next quote. I think we Mexicans pray all the time too, especially when you work in the meat industry. I try to be as welcoming as possible because I think we understand rejection. That quote was from Roberto Rodriguez, a local meatpacking employee, on the influx of Muslims in the industry, which is a trend driven by a nationwide labor shortage. The next quote says, "It takes a village to raise a child. It also takes a village to make a proposal like Safe and Successful Kids go through." This is a quote from the Lincoln Public Schools Board President Connie Duncan after the board approved entering an interlocal agreement with the city to fund school security initiatives. Here's a quote: "We've got to get back to where we belong in football, and that'll take care of a lot of it. And then we've got to have some kind of stability in men's basketball. Women's volleyball is carrying the load." That was a quote from Athletic Director Bill Moose, reflecting on the priorities and aspirations for the Husker sports programs. Here's a quote: "People find their way. You've just got to believe in them." That's from Lincoln Southwest English teacher Terry Abrams, a winner of the 2018 Scottish Rite Award, one of the top awards given annually to Lincoln Public Schools teachers on how she relates to students. Here's a quote: "It's crazy we are sitting here talking about this, but this is the time we are in." That was from Tim Clare, the West Haymarket JPA member on plans to purchase metal detectors for use at Pinewood Bowl and the Pinnacle Bank Arena. And here's the last quote in the Journal Star in the today's editorials. "Education is to me the only gateway to success. In order for me to have a brighter future, I need to have education. I don't want to be like other women in my society where household chores would be their only duty." That was a quote from Nebras Hudaida, a 19-year-old Yazidi woman who gave a commencement speech at her graduation from North Star High School.
And from the opinion page, the World Herald, Michael Morrison, Creighton's Vision and Progress. Creighton University's steady advances as an academic institution and civic contributor are a significant source of vitality for Omaha. One of the key figures in Creighton's progress, helping lay a foundation that's now yielding impressive results, was the Reverend Michael Morrison, the university's longest-serving president. Morrison, 81, died Thursday in hospice care in Wisconsin. He became a member of the Jesuits in 1955 and was ordained 13 years later. He began his university teaching career in 1972 at Marquette University. In 1981, Morrison took the helm as Creighton's president, a position he held until 2000. The university made many strides forward under his leadership. 10 new buildings arose during that time, including the VJ and Angela Scott Student Center, the Byrne Research Tower, the Lead Education Center for the Arts, and the Cardiac Center. These structures demonstrated impressive vision by the university, including expanding Creighton's academic offerings, boosting opportunities for students, and strengthening the university's civic contributions to Omaha. Under Morrison's leadership, Creighton established the nation's first doctoral program in physical therapy. The university endowment, so important in helping fund scholarships and endowed academic chairs, increased from $16 million in 1984 to more than $200 million during the multi-year Creighton 2000 campaign. Creighton and Omaha are stronger due to Morrison's vision and leadership.
Thanks. We have a little time in the editorial, the time set aside for editorials, and so I'm going to read a national editorial from Cal Thomas, which is published in the Lincoln Journal Star. He leads out with a quote: "I am shocked to find that gambling is going on in here," and that was Captain Renault from Casablanca, the classic movie. "Human nature being what it is, it should come as no shock that the next level of approved gambling in America is sports betting. States already have casinos, the lottery, and other ways of separating money from the weak for their ravenous and bottomless coffers. So why not allow betting on sports contests? The question should answer itself, but in our increasingly permissive culture where anything goes, the standard that once delineated right from wrong and measured what best promoted the common good has gone with the wind. The Supreme Court last week struck down a 1992 federal law that had effectively banned commercial sports betting in most states. That, according to the New York Times, opens the door, he's quoting now, to legalizing the estimated $150 billion in illegal wagers on professional and amateur sports that Americans make every year, close quotes. The law the decision overturned, the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, prohibited states from authorizing sports gambling. Among its sponsors was Senator Bill Bradley, a Democrat from New Jersey, former college and professional basketball player. He said the law was needed to safeguard the integrity of sports. Bradley was right, though sports have been compromised for many years. During my brief college playing career, the basketball head coach passed out food money after games. Players who did especially well received more food money than those who scored fewer points. It's gotten much worse since then. There have been financial scandals involving thrown fights and shaved points extending back at least as far as the Black Sox scandal of 1919, where some Chicago White Sox players agreed to throw games to benefit gamblers. The Supreme Court decision has removed even a veil of disapproval from sports gambling, and what was once reserved for Las Vegas and illicit bookies will now go national. Already I am receiving emails inviting me to wager on various sports. Gambling addiction has become a serious problem in America. According to the National Council on Problem Gambling, 15% of Americans gamble at least once a week. Approximately 2% to 3% of Americans meet the criteria for problem gambling. That's around 6 million adults and about 500,000 teens. Young people risk developing a gambling problem at a rate of about 2 to 3 times that of adults, and approximately 6% of college students in America have a gambling problem. NCPG research says roughly 40% of people with a gambling problem started gambling before the age of 17. If that isn't enough, consider these statistics. The National Council on Problem Gambling notes the annual cost associated with gambling, crime, addiction, and bankruptcy is $17 billion. Approximately 76% of problem gamblers are likely to have major depressive disorder. The National Council on Problem Gambling also says children of problem gamblers are at a higher risk for a number of behaviors, including problem gambling, tobacco use, and drug use. Oregon Problem Gambling Resource states that about 10% to 17% of children of problem gamblers and about 25% to 50% of spouses of problem gamblers have been abused. Georgia State University estimates that about 50% of problem gamblers commit crimes, and about 2/3 of those crimes were directly related to gambling. GSU also notes that 73% of people who are incarcerated are identified as problem gamblers. An Australian study found that 1 in 5 suicidal patients had a gambling problem. Players who make less than astronomical salaries might be tempted by gamblers to perform at subpar levels in exchange for payments. This is a bad bet on many levels, except for state and local governments, which will show they care less about the effects on people and more about all the additional tax money they will take in. Again, that was Cal Thomas, who writes for the Tribune Content Agency.
We're going to move on to today's living and entertainment. An article from the World Herald out of the Los Angeles Times. Los Angeles. Computers try to crack the code of pop song popularity. If you find it hard to predict which songs are destined for pop chart success and which will flop, try asking a computer. After analyzing the attributes of more than 500,000 songs released over a period of 30 years, a computer algorithm was able to sort the successful songs from also-rans with an accuracy of up to 86%. A team of mathematicians from UC Irvine described how and why it accomplished this feat in a study published in last week's edition of the journal Royal Society Open Science. There's something magical about music, wrote the team, which was led by students Myra Interiano, Kamar Kazemi, and Lydia Wang. Scientists have been trying to disentangle the magic and explain what it is that makes some of us love some music, hate other music, and just listen to music. For the purposes of the study, the UCI team considered a song a success if it made it into the top 100 singles chart in the United Kingdom between January 1985 and July 2015. They compared those successes with other songs that were released in the UK during that time period. To quantify the acoustic properties of these 500,000 or so songs, Interiano and her colleagues relied on crowdsourced data from two projects of the MetaBrains Foundation, Music Brains and Acoustic Brains. This data classified songs according to 12 acoustic properties, including whether they are sung by a man or a woman, are happy or sad, are acoustic or electronic, among other attributes. Songs are also categorized according to their mood and genre, such as hip-hop, blues, country, and house music. Less than 4% of songs in the entire sample found their way onto the top 100 singles chart. To see what set these songs apart, they employed a machine learning method known as the random forest algorithm to crunch through all the data. Sure enough, some noteworthy patterns emerged. Successful songs are happier, brighter, more party-like, more danceable, and less sad than most songs, the team wrote. That may sound like an obvious recipe for pop music success, but it actually went against the dominant musical trends. Over the decades, songs exhibited a clear downward trend in happiness and brightness, as well as a slight upward trend in sadness. The study authors reported, the public seems to prefer happier songs, even though more and more unhappy songs are being released each year. That observation matched up with previous studies of song lyrics that found they contained fewer positive emotions and made more references to loneliness and social isolation as the years went by. In addition, the successful songs in a given year tended to be less male than other songs released at the same time, according to the study. Still, the team cautioned there are still limits on what computers can do. We can see that in general, successful songs are, for example, happier, more party-like, less relaxed, and more female than most, they concluded. But this does not necessarily allow us to naively predict that a particular happy, party-like, not relaxed song sung by a female is going to succeed.
Thanks. Here we have the doctor's column for today. These are Doctors Elizabeth Coe and Eve Glazier. Dear Doctor, years ago I was told not to consume grapefruit or grapefruit juice with statins. Now I understand that this restriction no longer applies. Is this correct? Dear reader, the reason people are warned to steer clear of grapefruit when taking statins, which are drugs that lower cholesterol, is that certain compounds within the fruit and its juice affect the way the medications are absorbed. Known as furanocoumarins, they interfere with the metabolic processes that break down a range of medications, including statins. And while you're correct that there are now a few brands of statins that don't interact with those compounds, it's important to check with your pharmacist or physician regarding your particular prescription before adding grapefruit to your diet. Statins are a class of drugs that get broken down with the help of an enzyme known as CYP3A4, which is found in the gastrointestinal tract and liver. It's a process that controls how much of a drug is released into the bloodstream, and it is factored into the calculations used to determine drug dosages. What happens when the presence of furanocoumarins, which are found not only in grapefruit, but also in pomelos and Seville oranges, is the work of that key enzyme is inhibited. As a result, a larger amount of the drug than is intended enters the blood and accumulates in the body. In the case of statins, too much of the drug in the body can lead to grave complications, such as increased risk of damage to the liver and muscles, which can lead to kidney failure. Grapefruit is a good source of vitamin C and has a bit of potassium as well, so patients often ask if there's a minimum amount they can safely consume while taking statins. Unfortunately, with many statins, the answer is still no. That's because we each secrete a different amount of the CYP3A4 enzyme in the small intestine. The same glass of grapefruit juice that would be safe for one person would be dangerous for someone else. Interestingly, that same compound that generates an overabundance of statins in the blood will decrease the available amount of a few other drugs, including fexofenadine, an allergy medicine sold under the brand name Allegra. Apple juice and orange juice have the same effect on fexofenadine, which is why the labels on both the prescription level and over-the-counter varieties of the drug carry a warning against taking it with any fruit juices. An estimated 20% of the population between the ages of 45 and 70 are prescribed statins, so the fact that several of the brands now available do not appear to affect the CYP3A4 enzyme is good news. The statins that remain on the no grapefruit list are atorvastatin, Lipitor, lovastatin, Mevacor, and Simvastatin, Zocor. And while the current literature suggests that rosuvastatin, Crestor, and pravastatin, Pravachol, as well as a few other statin drugs have limited or no interaction with furanocoumarins, we urge you to check with your pharmacist or physician before adding grapefruit to your diet.
All right. An article from New York about two brothers, the Duplass brothers, who followed an unconventional path to success. They're indie filmmakers, and they say that they just let whatever comes out of our stomach be the thing. When the filmmaking Duplass brothers sat down to list their top 10 movies of all time, one cinematic masterpiece didn't make the cut. Jay and Mark Duplass made room for Dumb and Dumber, Tootsie, and Raising Arizona, but The Godfather, often topping lists of all-time great films, was left off. Why it was says a lot about these offbeat indie darlings who rose to fame in 2005 with their $10,000 film, The Puffy Chair. I think I missed that one. And then went on to create a mini empire with deals at Netflix and HBO. They've always led with their gut. Jay and I don't approach things in any intellectual way whenever we're making something, because when we do, it tends to be bad. Mark Duplass said, we just let whatever comes out of our stomach be the thing. So their films weren't the typical best of candidates like Godfather or Citizen Kane, but quirky ones like Joe versus the Volcano and The Horse Boy. Like their projects, it was a highly personal decision. I think the more that you acknowledge that and get out of your head about what you think you like or should like, that's where the joy comes, said Jay Duplass, the older brother by 4 years. Their final top 10 film list is included in the siblings' deeply personal memoir, Like Brothers, which mixes autobiography, movie-making advice, observational comedy, old scripts and emails, and tips on keeping friendships healthy while also being business partners. They advise budding filmmakers to start making 5-minute shorts on their iPhones, buy cheap cars with good warranties, save money by living with roommates, enter festivals, ask peers to be critics, pay it forward, and urge artists to just keep plunging forward in a chapter titled The Cavalry Isn't Coming. The book is a simple product of a survivor's guilt, said Mark Duplass. His brother agrees. We do want to help people avoid a decade of suffering, if at all possible, because it was hard. The Duplass brothers fell into movie making when their father brought home a clunky video camera in 1984. Unsure how to use it, he gave it to his boys, then 8 and 12. One key detail was that it was so big it needed a second person to carry the tape deck. A brotherly union was born. They've written, directed, and produced films and TV shows together, including the HBO anthology series Room 104 and the films Jeff, Who Lives at Home, and Cyrus. They've also acted, Jay in Amazon's Transparent and Mark in The League, and were behind and in front of the camera for the HBO series Togetherness. Along the way, they became accidental icons, inspiration for people who like small, deeply felt projects over soulless, big Hollywood fare. We are B-minuses that made it, and that's really no false modesty, Mark said. Amid the book's film advice and life lessons, as well as defense of dicey pop culture items such as Karate Kid Part 2 and Air Supply, there are practical lessons for keeping creative friendships alive. I guess we kind of accidentally discovered that fighting and yelling at each other isn't necessary because when you fail, as long as Jay and I did as artists, your ego is beaten out of you. Mark said. Their advice, which is just as applicable to marriages, includes listening without interruption to the other side, agreeing not to argue after bedtime, and if all else fails, doing the Porky Pig, in which both sides take off their pants like the cartoon character and try to reassess the debate with a straight face. Okay, you just make it work. You do whatever it takes to make it work, Jay said. We're never getting divorced. This is never going to end. Even if we don't work together, we're still in the same family. We're tied together forever. Lately, the brothers are taking a page from their own advice and helping other young filmmakers. They produced the Netflix documentary series Wild Wild Country for McLean and Chapman Way, another filmmaking sibling team, and currently have backed the new docuseries Evil Genius on the streaming service. They admit that they don't know how to direct those projects, but still wanted help. You know what we know how to do, Mark said? Use our name, influence, and money to fund, creatively protect, and usher these filmmakers who are better documentary filmmakers than we are, and give them that thing and share it with them. It's the greatest thing.
Thank you. Well, we'll turn to Ask Amy's column. Dear Amy, I'm retired, and my wife is retiring soon. We have been building a home 2 hours away in another state, and will be moving there. This move has been planned for several years. Our youngest son is about to graduate from high school. He was accepted into his university of choice, but with a one-semester deferral. Our son is very upset about leaving the only home he has ever known and leaving his friends, even though his friends are all going away to school. With my wife's retirement, we need to reduce expenses, which we are doing by moving to an area with a reduced cost of living. The new location is a shore community well known to us. We vacation there every year. Our other older children are happy about it. I'm wondering if we jumped the gun moving so soon after his graduation. I feel terrible that he is so upset. He is not acting out or being disrespectful. He is just quietly saying that he hates the decision and doesn't want to leave. What should we do? Stressed out in New York. Dear Stressed, your son has reasons to feel anxious, disappointed, and upset. He is not headed off to college at the same time as his peer group, and once he does leave for college, he will not be returning to the only home he has ever known. His reaction is expected and appropriate, and he will survive it. Part of the ebb and flow of family life is that the adults occasionally make choices that their children don't like, just as children sometimes make choices their parents don't like. You and your wife should acknowledge how tough this is. Give him a few options for ways to make this a little easier on him. Could he enlist some of his buddies to help with the move and have them spend a week at the new house this summer? This will help him to build some memories in the new location. Could he have use of a car over the October break to perhaps visit his closest pal at his college, or go back to his hometown during the fall break and stay with friends there? Understand that you cannot fix this for him or completely protect him from feeling a little lost during this vulnerable time. Listen, commiserate, and yes, if you feel you have pushed too hard with the timing, say, I know this is tough and I'm really sorry. Dear Amy, my grandmother died 2 years ago. She was one of my closest friends and supporters. I miss her every day. Unfortunately, she struggled being a mom to my mother, and they didn't have the best relationship. My mom has mentioned several times how much she disliked her mother. Recently, while we were out having lunch, she mentioned how I'm just like my grandmother and how she tried to keep me away from her bad influence. She continued on about how my grandfather hated that I was like Grandma too. He passed away a few months ago. When I tried to get more information about what she meant, she said, never mind, and clammed up. These words have echoed in my head for the last couple of weeks, and I've never been so hurt. My mother often accuses me of being too emotional, and now I'm wondering if I'm being dramatic and should let it go. I love my mom. I've done everything possible for her since I was little because she needed me. Her words, not mine. I just don't know where to go from here. Signed, Grandma's Girl. Dear girl, your mother's childhood was very different from yours, and she might now be projecting some of her own complicated fears and anxieties onto you. It is not fair to open the door by saying something shocking only to slam it shut with a never mind when you follow up. You should ask your mother more about this, while accepting that you and she will always have vastly different perspectives about this polarizing person. Dear Amy, I was so disappointed in your response to disapproving wife. Her husband gave a homeless guy a beer every day. Why were you so disapproving of this kindness? Signed, Fed Up. Dear Fed Up, in my answer, I celebrated this husband's generosity and kindness. I also said that while I personally wouldn't provide a beer to someone on the street, this man's choice was one that I wouldn't and his wife shouldn't judge.
All right, thank you. Hints from Heloise. Dear readers, shopping online today is a big business, and with all those sales, there inevitably will be a return or two if that's necessary. Fortunately for consumers, online retailers now have fairly generous return and exchange policies. Many retailers provide a shipping label. The cost of this return shipping may be subtracted from your refund. If the item is defective, there's no charge, and some luxury retailers offer a paid label. Time limits can vary. Decide if an item is a go as quickly as possible. 30-day return windows are common, but retailers like to resolve issues in a timely manner. Call the company, read the invoice, or check out the website if you have questions. Heloise. P.S. Pull the plastic shipping bag inside out to use for your return and seal it with good quality packing tape. Masking tape can't seal properly, especially if it gets wet. For larger items, cardboard egg cartons can be used as filler in a box. Dear Heloise, I was at a stoplight in the right turn, intending to make a right turn after I had stopped. The person in the left lane pulled up as far as possible and blocked my view of the oncoming traffic. This was inconsiderate. Neil S. of Fayetteville, Arkansas. Dear readers, you may find that your cell phone or other electronic device charges faster if you turn it off before plugging it in. This isn't the case for all models, but try it if you need a quick charge. Heloise. Dear Heloise, I email frequently, and sometimes I would press some key that would send the email before I was finished with it. It occurred to me that if I don't enter the recipient's name until after I finish typing the email, I'll get a please specify a recipient message instead of an email being sent prematurely. Haven't lost an email since. Lisa S., Dayton, Tennessee. Dear Heloise, years ago, my mom told me that she could remember the numbers on her license plates, but not the letters. I told her to pick a word for each letter, so FJB became fresh jelly beans. What an easy way to remember the letters. Kathleen M. of Massillon, Ohio. Dear Heloise, my hint is to buy an extra set of measuring cups so you can store them where you use them daily. I keep a 1/3 cup in the oatmeal, a 1/4 cup in the cat food, and found spots for the rest of the set as well. Saves time and washing in the long run. Jackie in Maryland.
Thank you. It's time now for us to turn to business, and because the markets were closed yesterday, there doesn't seem to be much business news in the Journal Star, but Joe has handed me a page, the money page from the World Herald, sharing his paper with me, and I'm going to read this. Powell stresses importance of an independent Fed for our business news. It's from the Associated Press. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell warned last week that the Fed's independence from political pressure must be respected if it is to succeed in controlling inflation, maximizing employment, and regulating the financial system. His remarks came after Kevin Warsh, a former Fed official who President Donald Trump interviewed for the chairman post, said in an interview earlier this month with Politico that Trump did not appear to view the Fed as an independent body. He said Trump was direct about how he thought interest rates should be managed. Powell, in a speech in Stockholm, warned against taking that independence for granted. We must not forget the lessons of the past, when a lack of central bank independence led to episodes of runaway inflation and subsequent economic contractions, Powell said in prepared remarks. Following Warsh's comments regarding Trump, members of the Senate Banking Committee quizzed two of Trump's nominees for the Federal Reserve Board, Richard Clarida and Michelle Bowman. Both said yes when asked by Senator Sherrod Brown, a Democrat from Ohio, whether they thought it was important for the Fed to remain free from White House influence. Clarita said that neither Trump nor any other member of his administration had said anything during his interviews that would be compromising to the Fed's independence. The double-digit inflation of the late 1970s is often blamed in part on then Federal Reserve Chairman Arthur Burns, who was reluctant to raise short-term interest rates high enough to choke off inflation for fear of causing massive unemployment. Burns and other Fed officials were pressured by President Richard Nixon, who was leery of any political blowback from rising unemployment. Inflation remained high into the early 1980s until Paul Volcker, appointed Fed chair by President Jimmy Carter, pushed short-term interest rates to nearly 20%. That sparked a sharp recession, but it also reined in inflation. Powell spoke at a conference celebrating the 350th anniversary of the Riksbank, Sweden's equivalent to the Fed.
And another editorial from Susan Tompor of the Detroit Free Press. Think twice about betting on Wall Street's fear gauge. Wall Street's rocky ride in 2018, a level of chaos we've not seen in quite some time, has everyday investors fearing for their 401ks. But many times panic can drive you into pretty risky deals. The same applies to rushing into something you don't understand because your neighbor has a convincing story on a hot new way to make money. Ever hear someone you know try to chat you up on the wonders of trading the VIX? I'm not sure what that is. The Financial Industry Regulatory Authority is warning that novice investors could lose more money than they might expect if they trade complex speculative products that are designed to cash in on the market's volatility. Investors who have complained to FINRA say that they've lost six figures on exchange-traded products that track volatility is an asset. One caller we had heard from really lost everything. Jerry Walsh, Senior Vice President of Investor Education at FINRA, told me in a phone interview. The investor put virtually all of his family's assets on a volatility bet. He was investing in an exchange-traded product that tracked the inverse of the performances of futures on the Chicago Board Options Exchange Volatility Index, or what's known as the VIX. The investor bought the product on margin, essentially investing with borrowed money. The investment crashed, his money was gone, and he owed so much that he faces the possibility of having to mortgage his house to pay off the margin debt. Today, FINRA noted the specific VIX-related product he bought no longer even trades. We're not talking about your typical stocks and bonds. The products are not buy and hold investments that can be fairly volatile themselves. Typically, investors are tracking futures products or other derivatives pegged to a fear index. You're taking a significant risk and you need to understand that, Walsh said. There's always risk involved with these products. Many times, she said, individuals are hearing about such products through the financial news media and investing on their own through online brokerage accounts. But others say some brokers push the product too. A Forbes contributor wrote an article last summer that was titled, "Selling VIX is Hitting Magazine Covers. Should you be worried?" The popularity of such VIX-related products wasn't hurt, and by some eye-popping gains in the past. Some inverse volatility-linked exchange-traded products had returned more than 180% in 2017. And even today, some novice investors might be attracted to volatility-linked products. As we're seeing more swings in the stock market of late, but it's an area where individual investors need to move cautiously, if at all. David Sowerby, Managing Director and Portfolio Manager for Cleveland-based Ancora Advisors, noted that investors have seen higher volatility this year, with two 10% corrections in 2018. But it's nothing close to a 50% decline in the market meltdown nearly 10 years ago. Volatility on Wall Street was more extreme during the fall of 2008 and early 2009, he said. Sowerby said volatility-linked products that bet on a decline in market swings, not an uptick, were not a prudent strategy for the longer-term individual investor, especially when volatility or the VIX was at such historical lows, Sowerby said. Some VIX-related products enabled investors to profit when volatility was low, but then led to a dramatic loss when Wall Street ran into a major stock sell-off in February. The fear gauge, as the VIX has been called, has come under more scrutiny since the brutal market sell-off in early February. The Dow Jones Industrial Average lost more than 2,500 points, or 9.75% in the 2-week period. Credit Suisse Group AG's Velocity shares daily inverse VIX short-term ETM. It imploded in February's market sell-off, losing nearly $2 billion in about 18 hours, according to a Bloomberg report. The short volatility product known as VIXIV posted a 90% drop within hours, according to top reports. Allegations of market manipulation in the volatility trading universe have surfaced, including reports that the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission and Commodity Futures Trading Commission will conduct an investigation into some aspects involving the VIX benchmark. The VIX is not based on actual price fluctuations experienced on a given day. Instead, the VIX reflects an expectation of volatility over the next 30 days as implied by options prices. David Kudla, CEO for Mainstay Capital Management based in Grand Blanc, Michigan, said individual investors can easily be confused by how some VIX products work because there are sophisticated derivative securities that can be difficult to explain for even a math PhD. They are certainly not intended, even by their advocates, as a sole aspect in a portfolio or as the destination to park one's life savings, Kudla said.
Thank you. It's time for us to turn now to sports. And so from the Journal Star, here's the first article. Boston, LeBron James will get a couple of days to catch his breath, then make his annual June journey to Golden State to face a team far better than his. His 8th straight NBA Finals sets up as one of his most difficult, flanked by a largely unheralded set of teammates who force him to do much more at 33 than most other players are ever asked. But James keeps showing he can do it, and he can't wait for his chance to win another ring. Dare count him out? At the end of the day, the game is won in between the lines, and we have an opportunity to play for a championship, he said after Sunday's 87-79 victory over Boston. That's all that matters. James dragged an injured and inconsistent Cavaliers team out of the Eastern Conference and back to the NBA Finals, where they will be an underdog against Golden State, which ousted Houston in Game 7 in the West Monday. But after playing all 48 minutes in his 100th game of the season, punctuating one of the greatest series a player has ever had with 35 points, 15 rebounds, and 9 assists, he sure looks capable of more. The only way it would appear Cleveland would have a chance would be if James can summon his highest level, the kind that perhaps no other player can reach, and then do it 3 more times. This was the year James's finals streak looked over. Kyrie Irving had been traded to Boston in the offseason. Isaiah Thomas, Dwayne Wade, and Derrick Rose weren't the answers as his replacement, and Kevin Love missed significant time with injuries. And even after the Cavaliers remade their team at the February trade deadline, it didn't look good enough. Cleveland had finished just 4th in the East, never developing the necessary cohesiveness required to be even a mediocre defensive team, let alone a championship caliber one. The Cavs can still surrender open shots everywhere, a flaw that seems fatal against the three-point happy Warriors. The only obvious advantage the Cavaliers have is James, the kind of player who can win a Game 7 in Boston with a team that was without its other all-star because of a concussion and couldn't shoot straight deep into the first half, with Cavaliers other than James missing their first 10 threes until J.R. Smith hit one with 2:54 remaining until halftime. I mean, the bigger the stage, the bigger the player. And he's been doing it for us since we've been here, said Cavs coach and former Husker Tyronn Lue. A great quote from the great Doc Rivers is, "You always want to go into the Game 7 with the best player, and we have the best player on our team going into Game 7. I like our chances."
Thanks. I'm going to go to Tom Chattel's editorial on the sports page of the Omaha World Herald, first downs and second guesses. Taking stock of our sports world and recalling the first rule of sports writing, root for the story. Nebraska basketball will be a great story next season. The team should be decent too. I hear some say that getting the band back together only puts more pressure on Coach Tim Miles. I couldn't disagree more. One of my favorite lines in sports is from the great golfer Lee Trevino, who was asked about the pressure to win a U.S. Open. Trevino said, "That's not pressure. Pressure is playing for $5 when you only have $2 in your pocket." The same holds true for Miles, who now welcomes back his best team and the deepest collection of talent for a Nebraska basketball team since 1999, 1996, or 1994. Take your pick. The point is this: if you're in a make or break contract year and you need to not just make the NCAA tournament, but likely win a game, you don't want an inexperienced bunch or a team short on talent. You want a stacked deck. If you have to have your best season as a coach, you want to have your best team on your side. Pressure? What pressure? Miles knows what he has to do, and he has the team that can go get it. Let her rip, Tim. Nebraska will be picked high in the Big Ten, and winning the Big Ten would be a very big deal. And the Husker and fans will want to break the Creighton winning streak. But those things are ultimately important only as they play into NU getting into the NCAA field and getting the highest possible seed, then doing work. Miles has been down this road before in 2014 and 15. Teams stacked with returning experience bring no guarantees. The key will be what lessons Miles learned from that year and how they apply. And you can be sure Big Ten coaches will have some new things for Palmer and company. But the most important rule of coaching is this: it's better to have Isaac Copeland, James Palmer, and Isaiah Roby than to not have them. And better to have high expectations than to have none. Have fun, Husker fans. I was mildly surprised that Copeland came back, but only because he turns 23 next month. I'm going to jokingly call him Fonzie, because being the old guy hanging around the kids. But will it be happy days for Miles? The Big Ten basketball tourney did well last week, drawing 12,404, considering Nebraska, no-show, and Iowa, 2 and barbecue were no help, and the event hadn't been here in 2 years. That total was twice what it has been in other Big Ten cities, and the facility is top-notch. With continuity through 2022 and hopefully NU getting back, the tournament should be better in coming years. Meanwhile, the Big Ten was expected to get 5 teams in the NCAA tournament, but only had 4. The league's 3rd and 4th place teams, Michigan and Illinois, didn't make it. Michigan was 33-21 and 15-8 in the Big Ten, but had a RPI of 58 and went 2-12 against top 50 teams. Illinois was 33-20 and 15-9 while going 7-7 against the top 50, and that added up to a 47 RPI. Illinois looked like a clear NCAA team, but no cigar. Half of those teams' wins were against Big Ten competition, and that was deemed not good enough. To those Husker fans who don't think the Big Ten can hold you back, consider Minnesota. Great season, earned a home regional. The Gophers were 41-13, 18-4 in the league, and 14-3 versus the top 50 for an RPI of 14. These numbers are their numbers Husker fans aspire to have. All that, and Minnesota was seeded 14th overall and will likely have to travel to number 3 Oregon State in the Super Regionals. Doesn't mean Minnesota can't get to Omaha, but that's tough duty after a big season. Meanwhile, 10 teams from the 14-team SEC made it, and many were crying that in 11th, Kentucky got jobbed by the committee. Only 2 weeks until the SEC World Series. The NCAA bracket released on Monday looked a lot like the usual suspects, but there are some interesting storylines to watch. Can Stetson, the Atlantic Sun champ, continue the recent trend of small schools making the College World Series? Stetson is located in Central Florida, where there's no shortage of talent, but this would be a fun underdog. The Hatters are hosting a regional too and would have to win a super regional at North Carolina. Sounds doable. Keep an eye on the Hats. It's been 10 years since Stanford made the College World Series, and this is the first season in 41 years that Mark Marquez isn't coaching the Cardinal. The new coach, David Esquire, was Marquez's starting shortstop and on the 1987 national title team. And Esquire has the Cardinal a number 2 national seed. Stanford making it back with the new coach is a great story, and let's make sure they know how to do downtown Omaha. Texas was last in Omaha in 2014, but this would be the first time under Coach David Pierce, and in the year that legendary coach Augie Garrido passed away. Florida State coach Mike Martin, 74 years young, became the all-time winningest coach in Division I baseball this year. But there's one win that has eluded him in his great career. Will Martin get one more at-bat in Omaha? Who do you got? LeBron James or Michael Jordan? The fact that there is a debate is James' greatest accomplishment, and there is most definitely a debate. There was a day when that idea seemed virtually impossible. One more, and I'm out of here. One of my favorite and loyal correspondents is Husker fan Mike Spinharney. One day he made me aware of more than his Husker thoughts. Spinharney is part of a local group called Husker Fans Salute the Troops. Each fall during a Nebraska away game, this group hosts 120 military families at the Cornhusker Marriott in Lincoln Hotel, and food is provided along with tours of the Nebraska football complex at Memorial Stadium. There's also a watch party with former Huskers attending a Sunday brunch with a speaker. This year it's Jay Foreman. To raise money for the event, the group has also an annual golf outing at Ashland Country Club. This year's event is set for June 29th with NU running back coach Ryan Held set to speak. For information, go to huskersalute.org. This group deserves a big-time salute.
Thanks. Here's a little bit of Husker news. During the second quarter drive in April's red-white spring game, outside linebacker Breon Dixon played a stretch that looked like this. 1st and 10, Dixon lined up over number 2 of a trips formation outside the field side, wide hash mark. The play is a run the other way, but there is bubble screen action to his side. 2nd and 5, Dixon again aligned to the wide side is pinched down on the hip of defensive end Finn Anderson instead of walked out over a receiver. He darts inside of right tackle Matt Farniak, and when quarterback Adrian Martinez keeps the ball in the zone read, he and Anderson combine to stop Martinez for a sack. 3rd and 6, after a penalty on the defense, Dixon is again outside the wide side hash and lined up on tight end Jack Stoll, the second receiver in the formation. Dixon drops in zone coverage, and the throw goes the opposite way to Tyron Lindsey for a first down. 1st and 10, Dixon walks back down off Anderson's hip. A Michael Wilbon run goes the other way. 1st and 10, Dixon is out on the wide side across from Lindsey and backpedals on the snap as the talented sophomore slot receiver works up the field. Dixon sees Wilbon get the ball in the backfield, though, and triggers forward past Lindsey, and then, turning to page B5, Farniak. He forces Wilbon to try to get back inside with a cut and drops him for a loss of a yard. In 5 plays, Dixon is lined up in 3 different areas of the field, both vertically and laterally. He lined up across from a tight end, 2 receivers, and a tackle. He's asked to force a ball carrier, disrupt behind the line of scrimmage, and play zone coverage. This is only one small sample of the responsibilities the Husker outside linebackers are asked to handle by Jovan DeWitt and Eric Chenander's defense. And while Dixon isn't the only one who can handle the variety, the smoothness with which he executes them in this sequence illustrates why his immediate eligibility should be a boon for NU come the fall. Well, there's more to this article, but it's noon, and so our time is up for today. So long for today from Deb Beatty and
Joe Watson.
Thank you very much, readers. That was very, very kind of you to keep things up as we end our